But which spec is the most fun when it comes to all of the melee reworks? Starting with the conclusion and the question is the way to go at Marcelian&Flame, because we have played all of the melee in the alpha for Midnight. And since every class is getting reworked, we have to kind of draw a line and see exactly which are the winners and which are the losers. Because there's a clear king and there's a clear, I don't know, jester, peasant. Oh my god, it is so bipolar, and I want to know if your spec is safe, so let us know in the comment section down below, because we're starting off right away with Frost Death Knight, which received absolutely no changes that I'm aware of, still to this day, as of recording this, and some of the tier sets have also been out, but we're not going to go into the tier sets too much, but we're going to rank this based off of fun and how good all of the simplification feels. And since Frost Death Knight didn't really receive any changes whatsoever, we're going to put it into S tier, and I'm going to tell you why. Actually, Frost Death Knight, as it's transitioning from the War Within into Midnight, it is one of the best specs, period, between complex and simple, and a fun, engaging rotation with one or two things to kind of juggle and optimize so that you feel like you're improving and putting time into your spec feels like it's worth it. You're, of course, getting the Apex talents, which is the only real thing that changes in Midnight, and that just wants you to press more Frostworms free, which is great. Doesn't really involve any other complexity except for the fact that you can recall the Frostworm to come back to you and deal a second pass at its damage on enemies for a little bit less damage, of course. That in itself is pretty cool, and the fact that Frost has kind of retained this duality of Breath of Sindragosa playstyles, non-Breath of Sindragosa playstyles, although now you're kind of always playing them with Obliteration, it seems. That gives it some flexibility and some appeal maybe to new players. So we are big supporters of Frost Death Knight. It is very good. Thank God we've postponed this video for ranking Unholy, because Unholy just received a bunch of changes last night, this morning, whenever you're watching this, 2 days ago possibly, with how it's actually working. Of course, we already have a video on Unholy out that you can check at the end of this one, but Unholy is actually looking way more interesting than before, because I was actually worried that it might have been a little bit too simplistic with how the Putrefy works and how little rotational implication it has, but a lot of quality of life has been addressed to Unholy, and one surprising fact was the I believe it's also extension of Dark Transformation, so you can just play more and extend its duration, have a longer cooldown, but I'm not sure if it's cooldown reduction, probably not for Unholy. All of these changes come and go on the alpha, so it's not really clear what the final version will be, but this actually propels Unholy to S tier as a really good spec. I was gonna rank it a little bit lower. It is fun. The theme of Unholy is definitely there, with the ghouls and the plagues, and no more wounds is very interesting, of course. How Putrefy is going to evolve over the course of Midnight can make or break Unholy, but as it stands right now, it's looking really great, at least as a honeymoon period period of Unholy, as far as that goes. Havoc is currently one of my favorite mains in the War Within, and it received very minimal changes going into Midnight. It did receive a little bit of pruning because it kind of had to. It was getting a little bit nuts. Now you don't really have Sigil of Flame anymore as it stands, and that's great for, I guess, all hero talent and all playstyles, because it did add an extra button. You also don't have Glaive Tempest, which you didn't really use before either, but now it's just a passive upgrade to Blade Dance, which I do have to say that I consider that to be the best version of pruning, and I'm going to prove that by putting into S tier as well. We're going to have a lot of S tier specs. I'm just going to let you know right now. Actually, we have 2 more. I'm actually looking at my notes here, but that's a surprise for you later. Having Glaive Tempest as an effect of Blade Dance when it hits 4 targets is really great, because you don't need to think about a different button, track its cooldown. All you need to do is like, okay, I'm pressing Blade Dance, of course. If I'm on 4 targets or more, having Blade Dance with enough fury to consume to proc that Glaive Tempest is really cool. It adds a little bit of death, a little bit of like, I'm not pressing Blade Dance just yet, I need a little bit more fury, and then I can proc that Glaive Tempest as well. I think that's the best version of taking buttons away from the spec that you just have to wrap your head around, and also bake them into an existing ability to empower that ability to kind of, oh, normally I just press Blade Dance on cooldown, but now I have this extra condition on top of it to proc that extra damage and ability, and that, I think that's actually really great. I'm not too sure what the purpose of the hunt is anymore, outside of the Aldrachi feeling, but so far, so good. Havoc is looking really great. S tier is usually a good balance between complex and simple, which is almost where Feral is. And I think they're doing a good thing with Feral, and I don't know if we have a video on Feral yet, but we will soon, where they're taking away some of its complexity when it comes to snapshotting. Snapshotting still exists, but now it's actually going to be visually represented on your bars by recoloring, re-iconizing the abilities on your bars whenever you actually have Tiger's Fury up, so that you know that whenever they're going to be applying the bleeds, those bleeds will be stronger. Now, this is one cool thing that Feral has going for it, outside of just being a very boring combo generator and spender. But to be fair, it doesn't really have anything else. Chomp is actually really nice. I love the fact that we have another bestial ability that just wants to bite the enemies to pieces. But outside of Chomp, it's kind of like the same Feral. And I'm not saying that Blood Talons was particularly interesting, but it was a little gimmicky thing that you could do in your rotation. I'm hoping that Feral gets maybe a little bit more love, a little bit more juice. But A tier is also not bad. Not bad at all. I'm just saying. Survival Hunter has been a very controversial spec, and we've also released a recent video about this. You'll see this theme throughout our channel a lot, because you should be subscribed to our channel, since we do so many videos about all of these specs as we get the chance to actually test them out. I'm gonna first put Survival into A tier and explain to you why. I have one big problem with Survival, and the rest are just like actually pretty positive points. It doesn't really feel like a Hunter spec having all of these bombs. It doesn't really feel like a Survival spec having shotguns and explosives. But as a playstyle and focused spec, and from the moment-to-moment gameplay perspective, Survival actually plays really well. It has really no real deep complexity to it. You have a couple of abilities that synergize with each other, right? You want to kind of keep spamming that Raptor Strike to build up those Mongoose Fury stacks. The number of Mongoose Fury stacks actually influences your damages quite a bit if you use the new Talon Call Strike as well, which probably everybody will use it with. I think it's called Bloody Claws. All of these names are just escaping me at this moment. And to be fair, Boomstick has to be one of the most satisfying abilities so far on the alpha. And Flame Fact Pitch is kind of like a hit and miss, with the ground effect also being on fire, and that kind of pisses people off because tanks keep moving things out of the fire, and that sucks. So yeah, but Survival plays well. It doesn't really feel like a Hunter. The fantasy of the Hunter feels like a ping pong ball moved around on the table by two tennis players called the Survival developers. So I don't know what Survival is supposed to be about. It doesn't really feel that much like a Hunter, but it definitely plays well. Windwalker, at first glance, the first impression that I had for Windwalker was that I was gonna put this into F tier, because it lost a lot of the tools that it had right now in The War Within, where I mained it and I actually fell in love with it. This is different now. Survival is actually, not Survival, Jesus. Windwalker is actually not bad. It doesn't have those explosive moments, but it's so consistently good, and how it feels throughout the rotation, that I'm actually surprised this is a World of Warcraft spec, because as with most specs and DPSers in the game, melee in particular, you have these little tiny cooldowns, or the big cooldowns, where your wow moment starts to happen. And outside, and even during those wow moments, your usual baseline filler abilities or generator abilities are kind of okay. They're okay at best. Sometimes they're a little bit meh, sometimes they're a little bit boring, like Hunter, for instance. However, what the devs are doing with Windwalker is very strange and very different. Almost every ability has some like quirks and functionality changes within the talents. We've been privy to this with Blackout Kick over the years, where Blackout Kick can hit multiple targets. It can stack that Master Teachings of the Monastery stacks up all the way to 8 now. Then you can hit a bunch of times. It can generate chi instead of spending chi, and that's another way that you can definitely modernize these specs while keeping them simple. Add different functionalities to the basic abilities. Rising Sun Kick now can turn into, what's it, Rushing Wind Kick right now, or Wind Kick period, where you can use the Sun Kick, Wind Kick, I don't know what to call it anymore, from range, and it does AoE damage. You're still kind of capped at 5 targets. It is what it is, but you have way more abilities that hit 5 targets and then just, you know, cleave a little bit less past those 5 targets. They've put passive Jade Stomp into the kit. I haven't had the chance to play it with, but there is an interesting capstone it's very controversial, where your Fist of Fury costs 1 less chi, but it does less damage. But the 1 less chi just adds such a different impact on your rotation. It feels very minor, but the economy of chi generating and spending energy as well is so different with just that it feels kind of fresh and kind of neat. I'm not fully sold on it, but A tier, I mean, come on, A tier is pretty good. Not something I can say about Red Paladin. I don't know where to put Red Paladin. I have it here on my notes that it's B tier, but the more I think about Red Paladin, the more I'm constantly changing my mind. Listen, I understand that Red Paladin is a simple spec that is very portable for people to take in, of course, but so are pretty much all the other specs that are here on this list. Very much simplified. A lot of button bloat has been cut away, and I don't know if Red constantly deserves the constant pruning that it's getting, and it doesn't really feel like it has any depth to it. That's my main problem with Red. I'm not opposed to simple. Simple can be done really well, but there's nothing to do, really. Nothing really ever changes your rotation whatsoever. And you would think that spells like Execution Sentence would make it okay. During Execution Sentence, you want to do this because you're building up a little bit more damage towards its final hit, but that doesn't really change anything whatsoever. No matter what you do with Red, you just play the same, whether you're in your cooldowns, whether or not. Your cooldown sometimes can give you like a Hammer of Light proc, or you might generate a few more free consumers, free spenders, whether it's Divine Storm or whether it's a Final Verdict or whatever it is. Final Verdict doesn't even feel like it's a choice anymore. It's pretty much locked in. So Templar Strike or Templar Verdict, or I don't even know what the finisher is, can probably just be deleted from the class. So why does that spell even exist? It's a little bit too simple. It's a little bit too much, and I kind of really want for Red to be a little bit better because I need an excuse to play it, and I think that what ARMS is doing to its spec is something that Red can learn from. I was gonna put it into B tier, but I think I have to put it into C tier. I'm sorry. It's fine. Probably if you like Red right now on live, you might like it. That's the thing. You might like it in Midnight. It's simpler than it is right now. And does it deserve to be simpler? It has fewer procs, fewer cool moments. So you take that as you will. Now, as Assassination goes, this has been the W for rogues at the moment, where it seemed to get some of the best abilities and changes when it came to feedback from players. First of all, probably the most notable change was Crimson Tempest and its rework. Crimson Tempest now has a new icon. It's very nice and pretty and all shiny. And it's a generator now. It costs quite a bit of energy to cast. 60 energy is pretty big. Generates 1 combo point. But what it does, it spreads your bleeds. All of this time, all of these expansions, with Feral being an example, we thought about, okay, our finishers have to spread the bleeds because, you know, I mean, Rupture is a finisher, but Garrote is not. So we always thought, okay, we need to somehow find the finisher way to spread our bleeds. And we had, of course, the old Crimson Tempest, which didn't really spread our bleeds, but added a bleed in AoE as a finisher. And we had the Indiscriminate Carnage, I was about to forget it, which we don't have now right now, where you needed stealth for your bleeds to apply in AoE. That was a cool mechanic, but adding stealth gameplay in AoE, and that would be Mythic Plus, because that's probably the only time we would ever use Indiscriminate Carnage, just added a very weird flaw where the only time the group in Mythic Plus would have to like change their pacing is when they had an assassination. And that's it. No other rogue spec would have this necessity of being in stealth to enable their AoE. So the new Crimson Tempest is grade A, nice. The Apex sounds are also pretty cool, giving the extra feel of Envenom windows being a little bit more impactful. And for all of those energy pool haters out there, you get energy regeneration once you're done with the back-to-back spamming of Envenoms. And I don't mean that as back-to-back globals, but finishing with Envenoms aggressively, continuously on and on. So I feel like that's really great. And they've also simplified Caustic Spatter. They simplified a lot of stuff for Assassination. So that's a win. And now we get to the first possible controversial spec, which you can argue whether it's good or bad. I actually super dislike what they're doing to Outlaw Rogue at the moment. Outlaw Rogue is the melee example. I thought this would be red, but I think it's Outlaw right now. Outlaw had, okay, granted, it had a lot of complexity and a lot of depth to it and too many buffs that you needed to track efficiently with weak auras or other add-ons or reading your top part of the screen to see what your buffs are. I agree. But this is too much. Roll of the Bones has been dumbed down so much, where now instead of like a really interesting combination of 7 buffs that you could get, you now have like 2 or 3 buffs: the good, the better, and the best. That's it. That's the only way I can criticize this. So it's just weird. It feels so bland and so boring. Not to mention that this is, of course, a personal bias of myself. Crackshot was the best outlaw playstyle that I have ever engaged in. Felt very satisfying, very rewarding. For particularly Crackshot, I didn't really feel like you needed to track much outside of just your Shadow Dance or no, your Subterfuge, which obviously this can be fixed with the modern version of the pruning of the classes. But you lost that, and Hidden Opportunity just feels very wonky. But I think the biggest criticism that I have for Outlaw being an F tier, which maybe it's fair, maybe it's not for this alpha version, is that it's the absolutely most buggiest spec that I have played, and it's just not fun to test anymore. Consistently over the last couple of years, the amount of bugs that Outlaw had border on unacceptable at this point. I don't know what it is. Like, it's just too much. Like, how can I enjoy a spec if I don't even know if it's functioning properly? The level of bugs is not just Outlaw, by the way, but Outlaw feels like it's the most egregious one. Just makes it super unfun anymore. I don't even know if the build that I want to play will function because there's always a bug for a major ability that just doesn't work properly. Not to mention that now you could just not use Between the Eyes to finish your opponent by just consuming your combo points. So how can we even be able to criticize or test this in any way, shape, or form? This is just too much. I'm just not a fan. Subtlety was going to get the bottom of the tree, but I'm going to put it into D tier. One good thing about Subtlety as well, Marcelian tested these as well, is the flow of it. It feels very fluid. It feels very smooth. And that's still a good thing that specs should have nowadays with all this pruning. However, weird changes for Subtlety as well. Shadow Dance right now just doesn't give you a damage increase, so it just feels weird. What I thought Subtlety was supposed to be like the stealth user. Stealth is supposed to empower you. I understand that you can use the stealth abilities from stealth with Shadow Dance while not being in stealth. That's the core concept at the moment. But and I could get behind this if it wasn't for the next two problems that I personally have with Subtlety, one of which being that secret technique just doesn't really hit that hard anymore. That always felt like Subtlety's really awesome moment, that you're building up to this big secret technique hit that just explodes everybody in AoE, in single target as well. And that felt great. That felt a uniquely Subtlety thing, and that's gone. I don't know how they're tuning. Maybe it is a tuning thing. It's also a damage amp thing, which they've addressed, rightfully so, but I think they went overboard. Subtlety was also one of those specs that stacked the damage modifiers on top of each other until this one moment where you would do insane damage and you would do like tank damage outside. This was getting a little bit too much, although it was fun to play if you played it right, but I can understand them taking it away. However, Dance Macabre being the other thing that I don't like, bro, this is just a boring capstone now. I think they should just remove it from the game. The current version of Dance Macabre is just terrible. Before, it felt like, oh, if I use a different ability every time, it stacks up this damage amplification modifier that just makes me do more damage. I think just having that in the game is fine. Removing Flagellation is okay. Removing a lot of damage amps is okay. Removing Shadow Dance damage amp is okay, but keep one, man. I feel like we just lost all of them. Keep one, and Dance Macabre is just using a different ability, lashes out at a target and deals more shadow damage. That's so boring. That's so passive. That's so unintuitive. I just don't care for it. I'm sorry. It's a little bit emotional. I love the old version of Sub, and it's getting worse and worse. But we do have the king. Oh, am I spoiling it? Well, listen, doesn't matter, bro. I think Enhancement and Shaman by extension, but we'll get to the ranged version of the DPS specs in a week. I think Enhancement should be the standard for how you design specs. Enhancement is what Outlaw could have been, because Enhancement and Outlaw kind of fought each other for the title of the most complex and complicated spec to play in the game, and I think that probably went to Enhancement more so than Outlaw. Enhancement was more complex, Outlaw needed more add-ons. However, Enhancement just works, dude. It has been massively simplified, bro, where you don't need any add-ons to play whatsoever, but it has a little bit of depth. It has a little bit like, okay, when I do this, I get this, so I kind of have to change my rotation slightly. You don't need add-ons to tell you what to do. You don't need any indication on your screen. You just kind of no, it's I don't know how to explain this. It's really good. The procs that it's getting with Rite of the Lightning in Stormrigger just makes it spreading lightning rods so much easier. You don't need to tap target. Totemic just makes back-to-back lava lashes just feel so good with the hot hand window, with the Sundering proc, and there's like no complexity to it almost at all. It's not simple. It's not Red Paladin still. It's a little bit, but I think this is the perfect version of the modern melee DPS for World of Warcraft, and I hope that more specs take example out of this. Now, I did mention that what Red could have done is what ARMS is doing right now, because also recently ARMS has received its capstones, and they're bringing Heroic Strike back. What an ode to an old ability that is so iconic to Warrior. I think it was the first ability that Warriors ever learned in World of Warcraft, and has been taken away for so many years, and now it's bringing, now it's coming back in the form of its Apex Sounds. And I think after ARMS getting gutted in the War Within and feeling so poop, now it's actually going really well. The rework to Sweeping Strikes is actually really interesting, where Sweeping Strikes are charges now that you consume, or stacks of the buffs that you consume, and it's not baked into your major class identity anymore, and that feels incredible. I feel like the focus on Slam, hopefully being tuned properly, brings it back into the builds, because Slam was also an iconic ARMS ability that has been kind of dead for a lot of years, so I'm excited to actually press it back again. Whirlwind as well feels really great to play, and the cooldown reduction on, this was the cooldown reduction that I thought about when I was talking about Unholy, to Warbreaker or Colossus Smash right now, because they're one and the same now. There's no more, you know, single target Colossus Smash, AoE Colossus Smash, there's just one thing now. Is really great with, especially with Demolish or Colossal Warrior. It feels so incredible. I cannot wait to actually play this at full level with tier sets and more gear. I think this is very close to put it into S+ tier, but I'm just very hesitant. I've been hurt and heartbroken with Warrior before. I just don't want to be there yet. Almost similar with Fury. Fury is a little bit less than ARMS Warrior. I'm not a big fan of the capstones of Odin's Fury going away, because it felt nice proccing Odin's Fury and giving you all the Whirlwind stacks. I do like that Ravager went away. I feel like Ravager was just too good of an ability as opposed to Bladestorm. I want to feel great when I press Bladestorm. I don't want to play Bladestorm because that's the only way Slayer can work. I want to play Bladestorm because that's the cool ability and does a lot of damage, and Ravager kind of takes that away, since Ravager is just a better Bladestorm in the live versions, and having that leave is actually really great. I like the fact that they're taking some chances with the Fury capstone, which brings hope for the future, kill or be killed, although I don't think anybody's realistically going to use that, but it's great that that's an option there. I like the fantasy. It's going to die, I'm 100% sure, but I like the fact that they're taking the risks to design more cool warrior thematic concepts than just build rage, spend rage, build rage, spend rage, which granted Fury is still kind of mostly doing. Not a big fan of Ashen Juggernaut leaving, but I don't know, maybe they just cannot balance execute properly with that particular, I want to say, talent at this point. And this is how it's looking at the moment. This is just the fun tier list, by the way, and this is from our perspective. Of course, you can have a different opinion. Maybe you've also tested some of these, and you can let us know in the comment section down below. And just for you to kind of catch up with why Fury is A tier and not higher or even lower, you can watch our recent video that we did covering Fury, and maybe give us your opinions as well, because it's looking better for Warrior for sure. And also, by the way, did you know that Fury can hit up to 8 targets now? AoE cap much? Not as much. Not for Fury.